So in certain types of workflows, not just in the film, but in corporate, I've made certain decisions, in certain cases to stay within Premiere, and in other cases to venture off into After Effects. Primarily some of the, or two of the things that I want to touch on today within Premiere Pro is creating very simple text in certain cases, and certain automation workflows. So I really like the way that you can save presets and apply them to multiple clips, multiple text items at once. But when you're looking for a little bit of extra edge, and you have the time, and your client is paying you fairly, why not go over to After Effects once in a while and see what you can do in that application? So the first example that I want to take a look into, and this is of advent of CS6, is where they actually added adjustment layers. Okay? I think one of the strongest things within Premiere Pro is your ability to have an adjustment layer over clips and do some color correction. Okay? And that just involves, we can take a look at this sequence right here. It's just a series of clips. And while there are a ton of tools within After Effects, when time is down, we have a ton of tools available for us right side in Premiere Pro. And they're even adding to it onto the next version. So the idea would be just to simply, in this particular case, let's say over all of these clips, we could go within our project itself. And down here in this new item menu, I can create an adjustment layer. It's very intuitive where if we look at the adjustment layer itself, it's going to match the actual sequence settings. So whatever sequence I have selected at this point in time, it's going to take that and basically match it. So if you have something or a sequence open there at that time, or you're wanting to put into another sequence, just keep in mind that that is going to try to match those sequence settings. So I would essentially just press OK. An adjustment layer would be created here in this window. I'm going to hit the tilde key to make this full frame here. And I can just sort of see that being popped up. I'm just going to drag this right straight into my timeline and extend it out. Okay? And here, just like in an After Effects workflow, really simple stuff. I can go over to the Effects tab. Depending on what I'm searching for here, we can see simply just at this point in time, typed in that word curves. And it will minimize the search results. And I can take this curves adjustment, very similar for Photoshop or very similar into actual After Effects itself, and grab this and actually do a little bit of color correction adjustment. Brightening up my footage, potentially crushing my blacks. I can continue to make these adjustments. And besides this, and this is an overall adjustment, so to speak, let's just say, if time is of the essence, we can add a three-way color corrector, other tools that are very similar to us in Final Cut Pro 7 as well. Now, the next reason for me staying in Premiere Pro, and this is something I wish I had on the film My Father and the Man in Black, and that is the ability, we do have to go to another application, it's Photoshop, to automate a series of titles into the timeline using markers. Now, I can't take credit for doing this. I saw this in a demonstration by a gentleman named Yarley. He did a presentation that a FMC puts on something called the Editor's Retreat. Every single year in January, we go to a different place, and a bunch of different people talk about this. And this person flew from overseas and talked, and his whole thing is he loves staying in Premiere Pro. Right? And that's his whole workflow. If he can get it done in Premiere Pro, he'll never go over into After Effects, and his whole training is based on that. The website's called premierepro.net. And he showed this one example where what we were able to do is we create an Excel sheet. And the Excel sheet literally just has a series of cells. So let's just say that we're trying to create a series of lower thirds for a 2.5-hour documentary. Okay? You fill it out in the spreadsheet. Okay? You can even add icons or little images or graphics, and you can get Photoshop to put those out. So let's take a look at that. Okay? To look at the timeline that I'm going to be putting them in, I've set it up a little bit beforehand, but just sort of visualize if we had 30 or 40 different clips or several different hours of material here. What I've done is I've just taken some time to lock my video 1 track. I've targeted my video 2 track, and I've turned it on. On top of that, I've set up a series of markers in the timeline to where I want those titles to appear. Okay? That's the work that I've done in Premiere Pro ahead of time. Now, let me just show you a couple of the items that I'm going to set up in Photoshop. So I'm going to go to the desktop, okay? Just to my little folder over here. Okay, and I'm going to show you this little item. If I can find the Excel sheet. Let's just open up Excel. OK. Oh, is it just the continue button? Thanks. OK. Let's try that again. OK. Really simple spreadsheet here. And one thing to keep in mind is that Photoshop is going to be extremely particular in this process. So what I mean by that is any capital letters or anything like that, you want to keep this all into consideration. Because we're going to feed a bunch of data inside Photoshop and get it to automate out a series of lower thirds for us. Okay? So here, I simply have a couple columns saying the name of the person, their occupation, the state that they come from, and an icon, and the specific name of an icon. So these are actual Photoshop files, and they're simply just of, let's say, a graphic, so to speak, right, that I want to place on the lower third itself. And I'm going to use this data inside Photoshop to automate my series of titles. Right, so let me just go up to the Photoshop file that I've set up. I'm going to shut off the Excel sheet here. OK, so let's go into my lower thirds document. These lower thirds are nothing to cry home about, but hopefully they illustrate the point. OK, here we have a title, OK, that's been created, and it has the name of the person, essentially their occupation or what they are, the icon itself, and the state to which they come from. And what I want to do is feed it some data or some metadata to tell it to be a variable, so to speak. The first thing that I'm going to look at here is the icon itself. So in order to achieve this, I'm going to go under the image menu. I'm going to go to variables, and I'm going to go to define. And I want to define this icon down here as something called a pixel replacement. Okay? And as you can see, the name of this pixel replacement is going to be called icon, which matches up the name to my Excel spreadsheet. Okay? So all of that data has been defined here already for this particular variable, and the only different one that we have here besides the actual text fields. Let me just show you the actual text itself, and I've done it for these other three text elements. Okay? So I'm going to just look here at one of the text elements. I'm going to go to the image menu. I'm going to go to variables. I'm going to go here again to define. Okay? This has been defined in particular as a text replacement. Okay? The layer itself has been named. You can see that this is checked, and it's looking for that column that was defined in the Excel called state. And it just continues on to the other two items as well. We have the occupation itself, and we have the name. Now what we need to do is feed all of these items the Excel spreadsheet. Okay? So once that's all set up, which it has been for each of these elements, I'm going to go under Image. And essentially, I'm going to go to Apply a Data Set. And just to let you know, I've already sort of fed it a data set. I've fed it this Excel document. And I've told it what's involved, or basically how to read this Excel document. Now keep in mind, it's a simple text file. In order for it to read it, it's been saved as a CSV file. But here you can see it's read this actual Excel document, and here are the 4 names of each of the people from that document. And I essentially then just simply apply it to the image. Now, I want to export all 4 of these titles from Photoshop. This would involve me going from the File menu, choosing Export, okay? Data sets as files. I select a folder to which I want to save it to, and essentially I save out those files to that folder. Okay? I've already exported it out, so I'm going to cancel out of here. I'll just show you that version of what was exported, the actual 4 folders.
Nick, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
In regards to your icons,
Yep.
is Photoshop going to resize those icons, or is
There's an option there for it to resize them right away, so they'll resize it based on the first icon that you're using. Right? So it's going to resize it based on that. Right? And they have to also be a particular type of file. So we're talking a PSD file, a PNG. They can't be EPS or Illustrator in particular to be used as the file itself. Okay? So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we're looking here under the lower thirds for Premiere, here are my 4 files. I basically exported them out earlier today, but I'm going to import them right now inside Premiere Pro. And it just works like any type of other import. There's nothing special that I have to do here. I'll just make this window full frame, double click, navigate on my desktop to those images, spreadsheet lower thirds, find that folder, choose import. For this particular case, I don't want to have use of my individual items, so I'm just going to have these lower thirds as merged items. Okay, and I'll just click OK for each of the 4 files. Now for the fun stuff. I have all of my Photoshop files in here. Just double click to verify. I'm going to select them all. Okay? I'm going to make sure my playhead is at the beginning of my timeline, and I'm going to drag them on a small little icon down here. Select. This item is called Automate to Sequence. One of the options of Automate to Sequence is to place each of these items right there at that actual marker location. I have 4 markers, so at these unnumbered markers, it's going to be placing it as an overlay edit. The size, the length of these actual files are approximately 5 seconds each. That's based on your preferences in Premiere Pro. You can switch them to whatever length you want. Okay? So here we go. I'm going to hit OK. Remember that track was locked there. If I look at my timeline, here are each of my titles. Think about this with 300 to 400 different titles that you have to put into a documentary. And I wish this feature was in Final Cut 7 at the time of my documentary.